Hello and welcome to another Twisty Custom video. Today we're going to be looking at the Warout Custom 3D printed slide. I mean, who's going to spend $169 on a plastic slide? That's the question I wanted to answer for myself, so I spent that money and here we are. Warout Lao was the overall winner in the standard division of the IPSC Action Air World Shoot 2018 in Hong Kong. He is a Hong Kong native and this is the first custom slide that he's released for sale. You can see quite clearly the machining marks or the printing marks. They are fairly noticeable. There are various lines and things, but it's not what you would get from a cheap 3D printer where you get lots and lots and lots of lines. I assume there's been a bit of sanding or finishing done to this piece. You'll notice it has an integrated rear sight. It looks like an adjustable, but it isn't adjustable. It is all printed as part of a single piece. And inside, you will also see that there is an integrated blowback unit and piston. That is quite different from the average aftermarket aluminium slide that you would purchase. So let's just do the sums for a moment. This costs $169. On the other hand, if you go the typical route and buy an aftermarket aluminium slide such as this one from Airsoft Masterpiece, that's going to cost you, what, $80? On top of that, you're also going to have to buy the blowback unit, running you about $48. On top of that, you're going to have to buy the adjustable rear sight. The aluminium one can be had for around $40. And last but not least, you're going to have to buy a nozzle spring. That's going to set you back another couple of dollars. Altogether, this slide, with all those pieces I just mentioned, is going to run $171. When you look at it from that point of view, $169 for the Warout Custom 3D printed slide is not a bad deal when you consider everything that you get. Now, it's not aluminium, so why would you go with a plastic slide? Well, quite simply, a plastic slide is lighter. A lighter slide is going to enable you to achieve faster cycle rates. Faster cycle rates is faster shots. That means for a competitive shooter, this is the direction you want to be going in. Now, of course, a lot of competitive shooters still use aluminium. There's nothing wrong with that. But if what you're looking for is the fastest, shortest stroke, this would be something worth considering. Now, there are some subtle differences here. As you can see, with the integrated blowback unit, you cannot take that out to insert your loading nozzle. So for installation of the loading nozzle, you have to chop off the little nub. Here's one that's not been chopped off, and you can see that's the little nub that slips into the runner on your blowback unit. For the Warout Custom install, you chop that little bit off, and I'll show you how that installs in just a minute. Out of interest, let's just do some weighing. I've got my overly large kitchen scales here, and in micro mode, the unit on its own is coming in at 47.8 grams. That is super, super lightweight. Now, let's try and do a comparison with a stock slide. So here's a stock slide with the stock TM adjustable rear sight. And of course, we have to add a blowback unit. And together, that is running us at 69.1 grams. So, quite a bit heavier overall. Maybe those 12, 13 grams will make the difference. Maybe they won't. So let's have a quick look at how the nozzle installs on this piece. You'll notice there's a little metal piece just inside the slide, and that supposedly slides up. Then I can take my nozzle with the nubbin chopped off. I can insert it, I think, and whoa, I've not done this before, so I'm learning as we go in this video. I can only tell you how this works because I saw the video online. And we slide the nozzle onto the piston. Then the metal piece goes back in. Well, what's this metal piece for? Let's talk about that because this is interesting. There we go. The metal piece stops the nozzle from sliding too far forwards. So, once you have your nozzle in and inserted the metal piece, you will notice that the distance that the nozzle can travel is very, very short. I measured it earlier, that's 13 millimeters of travel, which is not very much. You'll also notice that there is no way to install a nozzle spring. The reason is that this is a springless design. It's the first time I've come across such an arrangement. It's unfamiliar to me, and I'm not entirely sure I completely understand it. But the principle is, if your nozzle is not sticking out too far, when you recoil, when the slide travels backwards, it doesn't have to move as far before it picks up the next BB. So as long as it's not sticking out too much during that recoil cycle, the nozzle doesn't have enough time to do a double feed or screw up the feeding mechanism. So you just don't need a nozzle spring. Compare that, for instance, with a regular blowback unit and a regular nozzle that would have a spring. And when you rack the slide on your gun, you can sometimes see the blowback unit, the nozzle lips kissing the bucking. And at that point, the nozzle is extended about this far out of your blowback unit. And we rely on that spring being very compressed in there to pull the nozzle all the way back. And that's running at, what, 30 mil, I think I measured, all the way out here. To here is about 25 mil, already twice the travel distance of the nozzle in the Warout Custom 3D printed slide. So that's going to make a big difference, of course, especially when it comes to short stroking. Because in a traditional setup, you still have to make sure that that nozzle is returning and going back far enough to pick up the next BB from the magazine. Because this one doesn't travel as far forwards, it doesn't have to travel as far backwards to pick up the next BB. So we've saved ourselves already nearly 1.5 centimeters or 15 mil of travel distance in our short stroke. So we can probably witness that a bit later on when we get to the end of the install. For this, I'm going to use a absolutely stock standard TM frame and lower. This hasn't been changed at all, it's all the same stock parts. But in addition, I'm going to use an Airsoft Masterpiece steel guide rod. This is, I believe it's an Airsoft Masterpiece aluminium guide rod plug. The spring is a Cow RS1 spring. You see it's graduated. And I've got 4 Cow buffers on there, bookended by 2 washers, moving from the softest through to the hardest to give us that recoil spring to return the slide to battery as quickly as we can. In addition, I have prepared a 9-ball Tornado heat gradation barrel that I had in the kit, as well as a Cow lightweight aluminium hop-up unit. And inside there is a 9-ball 6.00 barrel and 9-ball purple wide use bucking. That's not my preferred bucking, but it's what I've got lying around today. I shall probably change that in the future. So we'll try these pieces in both guns. Obviously we can't do a direct comparison because we have to use a blowback unit in the standard slide, but we'll put that into the standard slide for comparison purposes and see what we end up with. Wow, that is that is seriously lightweight. I mean, that is insane. Let's put some gas in and film it in slow motion and see what we get. Okay, so was there any major difference in the snappiness or the FPS? Yeah, not enough really, I think, to make a difference. Don't forget, we'd already upgraded to the Edge Ultra Light blowback unit and the Garda enhanced nozzle, and we know that that is a great efficient combination. And of course, with the improved barrel bucking and hop-up unit, performance was pretty similar. There was only about 5 FPS in it in terms of the average across 15 shots for both setups. The FPS was slightly higher on the stock slide with the upgrades, but as I said, we know that this blowback and nozzle is a great combination. I do not know what Warout recommends as a nozzle to go along with his integrated blowback and piston. I'm also intrigued by the idea of eventually one day perhaps changing the washer on this piston, because once I've taken everything apart, it looks pretty difficult to get to. One of the things I didn't mention earlier, because I haven't installed it yet, is the front sight. Here is a Edge Bullseye 1.5mm competition fiber optic front sight, and this is a perfect and easy slide in. There's just the right amount of tension there, because once the glue and screw has gone in, I think that'll be rock solid. And I don't know about you, but I hate having to fit front sights, as I have to on so many other slides, so that's pretty convenient. Overall, if what you want is an ultra lightweight slide for competitive shooting, have a look at this. The proof will be in the pudding, And what it boils down to really is accuracy, which I'll have to figure out over time, and indeed the longevity of this slide. Does it hold up to the forces of competitive shooting? So far from what I've seen, it handles great, it feels great, it's almost feels like a toy gun being plastic and so light, but you know, I like it. I like that feel. It doesn't feel quite as snappy as the setup that we had on the stock slide, and it certainly sounds different, but then, you know, I've never used a blowback unit that doesn't use a spring before, so maybe there's a bit of a learning curve there as I fine-tune my technique. I think I'm going to try running this as part of my standard setup for the foreseeable future and see how we get on. On the downside, there is no financial advantage to buying this. As I said earlier, it costs about the same as buying an aftermarket aluminium slide blowback unit, adjustable rear sight and the nozzle spring. There's only a couple of dollars difference, so there's no financial advantage. What about the disadvantages? Well, honestly, it looks crap. The finish is not perfect. As I said, there are machine marks and printing marks everywhere. It's a rough texture, and although it comes in grey and black, and this is the grey one, I mean, it doesn't look like it's coloured. It just looks like the material that they've used to print it. There's nothing else going on there. I'm also very confused about the decision to emulate an adjustable rear sight. I mean, it's not adjustable, so why bother? All you really needed was the bucket at the rear. It didn't need all of this extra stuff here, and surely that's just adding bulk and weight. It's one thing to emulate a real slide, so to speak, but realistically, Warout could have gone in a completely radical direction in terms of how the rear sights appear on this slide. It didn't have to be using a fake screw. And you'll also see, I don't know if you can make that out on camera, but there seems to be a lot of manufacturing dust still stuck in all the crevices on this slide as well, which, you know, you don't really expect when you're paying $169 US for a slide. You'd expect it to come looking a bit prettier, to be honest. Well, maybe I can try tackling it with some sandpaper. Maybe in the future I'll even think about Cerakoting it. I'm not even sure if this material can be Cerakoted, but it could be pretty cool if it was dressed up a bit more nicely. The serrations are okay. I mean, you know, they're big and aggressive, not particularly easy to grip, but, you know, not horrible either. As I said, I'll have to give it a go in some shooting stages and see what we think about it. What do you think? Do you think it's worth it? Are you interested in 3D plastic slides? Is it comparable to the Ken's Props slides that we see online? I'm not sure, but I'll give it a go for now. So there you go, another video on the Warout Custom 3D printed slide from Twisty Customs.